Hello and welcome. My name is Richard, and I warmly welcome you into this space I'm holding as support and guidance for those who feel called and led to a path of light and anchoring light into this world during this time of great transformation and change on planet Earth. You join me today on a beautiful piece of land here in rural southwest Australia. And today marks the 5th part of an 8-part teaching series that I've created to bring that support and guidance which I feel is most needed at this time. If you've stumbled upon this space for the first time, then I would encourage you to take a look at the introductory video that has been linked below, that sets out the structure and context and narrative of the Eightfold Journey. But for today, we're going to take a deeper look into the field of shame that was introduced in the last video, and the challenge that shame presents for those who kind of came into this world already awake and who haven't really experienced life on planet Earth much in the past, and who came here to anchor light and to bring a very unique message, and who entered through the gate of shock into a very foreign landscape, who struggled to understand and follow the rules of the systems and structures in place here. And who experience and are exposed to this field of shame because of that struggle and the inability to fit in, to say the right things, to do the right things that the herd expects, the common mentality. Because we come with a different language, a different perspective, a different frequency. Now, last time I really looked at it through the eyes of the young child, and who comes into this world who is very vulnerable and dependent on his caregivers, and who learns very early on that his very survival is at stake. If he cannot abide by what is expected of him by his caregivers, who may use the curse of shame to control and rein in, to shroud his light, his uniqueness, to gain compliance, to ensure the child fits in to the parents' or the caregiver's demands. And I introduced the idea that shame, therefore, is not an emotion that we feel, but is a piece of magic that we've learnt through the generations, passed on from ancestor to ancestor, and is used as a form of control that is far more effective than fear. Because you can trigger a soul into a state of fear and hold its power and its light for a short period of time. But it's very hard to sustain that control. But if you can get a soul to accept your curse of shame, your black magic, you can hold that soul for a greater duration of time. As that soul becomes lost in the midst of unworthiness, feeling disempowered, impotent. And I distinguish between shame and guilt, where guilt is a healthy redirection to protect and preserve the safety of the herd, as a behavior guidance mechanism. But shame is a much more destructive, and one cannot learn through shame. One cannot adapt one's behavior when one is in that state. Now, it's very interesting taking a look at the video that I produced last time. And I mentioned at the beginning that I was going to be going through some tricky terrain. And it really felt like that as I dropped into that space of the curse. It felt very uncomfortable to witness. And I noticed the part of me that wanted to scrap that video, that wanted to produce a more polished, attractive, appealing video for my audience. And that is what we do when we are in that field of shame. We want to wriggle and squirm our way out of it because it is so dark and heavy and unnatural a space to be. And we will do anything in that space to get out, to wriggle and squirm. But that is not the way to move out of that field. It's not an effective strategy. To navigate out of the shame state by trying to shift to a more attractive space, because that shame will just linger beneath the surface as you dance and bypass around it, and will continue to operate as a point of attraction in your field. So one must find the courage and conviction to look this squarely in the eye and to confront it with love, with grace, with the light of compassion and the light of wisdom. So that is why I kept that video and uploaded it and just said, this is authentic. This is part of the teaching series. It's not the end of the series. It's actually the midpoint. And now we will rise. But the moment to rise is not quite yet. Because I want to take a look at another question around shame today. As I said last time, I looked at it from the eyes of a young child. But what happens as we grow and mature and foster our own independence as young adults, as mature adults? Why is it that shame continues to linger and be a force of influence over our soul, over our light, over our commitment to be here? And it comes from a place of realization, of an experiential truth. Not an absolute truth, but as a definite feeling and experience that we cannot survive here on this planet in our human self without the approval of others. I just invite you to sit with that experiential truth with me today. We cannot survive on this planet without the approval of others. And what that means is I cannot come here, shine the light and bring the message I feel called to bring, and sustain a life here if that message doesn't resonate and garner approval. To some degree, I have to prostitute myself to survive. Or so it seems from this place and understanding. And the way that that approval is communicated is largely through the monetary system in this planet that we operate and the structure it operates under. And I spoke of this before as the artist's dilemma and the healer's dilemma. That you cannot just come here and produce what you feel your soul was born to produce. And give 100% to that and nothing else. And put bread on the table. which is an interesting idea to reflect upon, because that is where shame lurks through our lives. And it doesn't matter where that search for approval is expressed. It exists somewhere. So whether you're in the mainstream and pursuing a career, whether you're an entrepreneur pioneering a new idea, whether you're a charity seeking to do good in the world, whether you're an author, a musician, even if you're someone in the alternative field or the counterculture, we're all trying to find our like-minded souls and our groups and the people around us who can reflect back the approval and that is communicated through the money that comes our way through the service we give. And even the money that we spend and what we are encouraged to spend upon through governments, through the way things are priced, teaches us about what's approved of and what's not, based on the greatest value in the monetary system. Governments approve us to go to doctors, but they don't approve us to go to holistic healers. Governments approve us to send our children into the mainstream education system, rather than keeping them at home or an alternative, grounded school setup. And these are the shackles that bind us in this life, that guide our choices and our actions. And where we direct our energy. And it's very challenging to stand apart from that. Even though we know that that system and that world is dying, for the sake of our survival, we are compelled to play a role in it. And this topic is very much relevant in my own personal life at present. A couple of months ago, I was made redundant from a full-time job I'd held for the last prior 10 months. And redundancy was just another name to say that my employers no longer approved of my presence there and the work I was doing and the service I was giving, because my energy and frequency was not aligned with theirs. And so there was the shame around that had to be navigated. and entering into this wider field of shame around unemployment now. Relying on government benefits, but a benefit that does not carry the weight of approval, because a government doesn't want to encourage a soul to be unemployed in the traditional sense. And this is all compounded by the fact that I have a wife and 2 young children that are dependent upon me financially. And the question is alive of how can we sustain our life if I cannot find fresh employment, a fresh source of approval. And I've been applying for work and gaining no traction now to date. And so this theme of approval is very much alive. And this field of shame is very much one I am immersed in, personally. And here I am using this time and this space to bring forth this teaching material and putting it into the public domain. And even there I am seeking your approval to some degree. Wanting it to be watched, wanting it to be liked, wanting it to gain traction. And out of this search for approval, there is a lot of anxiety that arises. And I say again that this is something that really speaks to those souls who come into this world already awake. If you come into this world and played by the rules for many years and built careers and built families and built a life, and then you go through an awakening rather than a remembering, you've probably got some credit of approval in your bank as you transition to a new way of being here. But for those of us who are here to remember that credit of approval is not there. Money is hard to come by. And that is why we have this great longing to win the lottery or have some big windfall come our way. Because it's a huge windfall of approval that could sustain us for a period of time. So then we could get on and do what we know we're here to do and be the person we are here to be. Rather than playing around in the old world that we don't feel aligned or resonant with. But that lottery win doesn't come because there's a very powerful lesson that we are here to learn through this setup, through this shame. And this is something we will take a look at over the remaining time together. It's a journey of self-love. How do you champion your own heart, your own truth? And it has to come from within. A force so strong that it can rise and meet and transform what is present here now. Rather than being a victim of this curse, one rises above it and then begins to see the world in a whole new light. Because as I say, it's an experiential truth. That we see from a particular lens we look at. But we can look at this from another lens. And we will do that. But that is the journey. And that's why I find it helpful to call shame a curse. Even though that word feels quite loaded and heavy and scary in a way, rather than just calling it an emotion. Because when you see it as a curse, you find the empowerment and the truth that a curse can only penetrate into your being, into your field, if you give it permission. A curse cannot enter without it. Black magic cannot work. And there is a great temptation to go down the rabbit hole and dance the dance with the shame, to dance with the darkness, to grapple with it with the light. But in truth, that's a long and interesting but ultimately futile road. You cannot outrun shame. You cannot exhaust it. No amount of white magic can penetrate and pierce the shroud and lift the curse. Ultimately, it comes down to a fork in the road and a key choice. Do I say yes to this energy or do I say no? And turn the other way. How do I be in this world and trying to navigate my survival through it? Dealing with this struggle of approval, but without the underlay of shame to it. Dealing with this from a place of sovereign empowerment and presence. this is key, I feel. And in the weeks to come, and the remaining 3 chapters of this story, we will look at how that can play out. So that completes today's teaching. A powerful message here, I hope, and intend to convey. From my heart to yours, dear one. Many blessings.